Okay, so today, this particular course or lecture is on mastering intangible assets. And intangible assets are the people, the technology, the culture, the secret ingredients for different products that we sell. But intangible assets are all intellectual capital that is owned by an organization. And it's how they use intangible assets that makes an organization competitive. And it's how they legally protect their intellectual property, such as the iPhone versus uh, the iPad versus Facebook, Amazon Prime. All those are types of intellectual capital that has been either trademarked, copywritten, or either uh, trademarked through a patent application in order for them to use them to gain some type of wealth or for the company. So think about it. Yesterday I noticed that Kanye West received a valuation of $2.77 billion. And in the reading on how he received that valuation is based on him owning Yeezys, um, him being the sole owner of Yeezy, which allowed him to actually go and have his company valuated at $2.7 billion. Now, does he have the actual uh, network of $2.7 billion, meaning he can actually put his hand on $2.7 billion? No. Over the next 3 to 5 years, he could sell product that can gain him up to 2.7 billion or more. But all of it is based on him having the intellectual capital, intellectual property in the trademark of Yeezy, which gave him this valuation. So intangible assets, as it relates to trademark, copyrights, and patents, are critical for organizations. It will give a lot of organizations its competitive advantage. Before I get started, I just want to always talk about this Black Business Professional Coaching Program. So this is a program I have, and I work with Black business professionals in corporate as well as entrepreneurship to help them um, enhance their skills and be more competitive in their space to drive performance within their organization. Things we're going to talk about today is intellectual capital, human capital, and um, cultural capital. And those are the three intangible assets that we want to discuss. This is a particular book that I published about 5 or 6 years ago, well, 2019, and it's called Strategy Spelled Adam. It basically um, gives the 4 phases of strategy management, and it also gives the elements within each phase to show you how to um, streamline strategic planning to make it more effective and to make sure you cover all the things that's related to strategic planning to drive performance in the organization. This is another book that's also predicated on the Adam strategy management model, but this is more of a workbook. And I call it the executive performance journal because I use this particular book to coach executives to ensure that they have the right application of strategy management, which increases their confidence, increases their skills, and increases their know-how to effectively be engaged in organization and the culture within the organization to advance and develop strategic planning. Now, the model that's used within both books is the Adam Strategy Management Method. And as you can see on the left, on the top left, you have analyze, and on the top right, you have develop. What you see underneath analyze and develop are the elements that needs to be implemented to effectively drive change. I mean, to effectively um, move a strategic plan in the organization. So those are things that have to take place, like marketing analysis, internal interviews, external interviews, focus groups, and developing a strategic vision, a change agenda, and so forth. And as you get to the bottom, you have execute and manage. We have risk management, alignment, cascading, communication for execute. And on the right, you have governance, calendar, initiative review, strategy review, and strategy refresh. Those are things that people need to do in order to effectively move through the phases of strategy management and to develop an effective strategy for an organization or for a business in particular. And at the top middle, you see pre-retreat and retreat. Those things happen prior to going to the retreat and at the retreat. And at the bottom, you see post-retreat. Those things happen after the retreat. So you develop the strategy at the retreat. And after the retreat, you set up a meeting with a group of people and you start to develop, what is the risk strategy associated with this strategic plan? How do you align the strategy across the organization? How do you communicate the strategy? And what change resistance do we expect and how to mitigate those changes? And on the managed side, it's governance calendar. You create a calendar where all your initiatives are so that everybody knows when there is a strategy review meeting to come to the meeting prepared to discuss certain things as it relates to what's populated within the governance calendar. So strategy map. So the first thing about understanding intangibles is to understand the strategy map because everything ties back to this particular object or strategy management tool. So a strategy map is a one-page diagram that captures the strategic objectives being pursued by an organization. It uses 4 perspectives: financial stakeholders, internal processes, and talent and technologies to provide a holistic view of the organizational strategy. Before the strategy map, we have these strategic plans that was like these yellow page type books, right? White page, yellow page, these thick books. And organizational leaders had to be able to communicate a lot of the information within the strategic plan. Today, we have a strategy map that sits on top of the strategic plan that gives us a bird's eye view of all the strategic objectives within or goals within a strategic plan. Now, underneath the goals are the measures, targets, and initiatives. They go inside the actual binder, but on top is the strategy map. And as a leader of a company, an entrepreneur, or a corporate organization, whenever you go out to talk to stakeholders, the only thing you need to bring with you is a strategy map. You need to be able to communicate to your partners or those who you're trying to seek to collaborate with what's within that actual strategy map. So the strategy map has 4 perspectives. The top one is financials. The second one is stakeholder, the people who buy your products. Then you have the internal processes, and that is the people within your organization who creates and make the product. And then you have the talent and technology. Those are the people that you need to develop to actually do the work in the internal processes perspective. So at the bottom, you have talent and technology, and that includes all the concept of what we call intangible assets. The people, the culture, and the information capital needs to be listed at the bottom of the map, and they need to be aligned to the products or the strategic objectives on the map. So let me show you. So at the top, we have financial objectives. One is contribute to stakeholder value. F2 is become employer of choice. F3 is to maximize return on human capital investment. And F4 is to minimize HR costs. Given that this is a HR strategy, it's more of an internal strategy. It's not customer focused. So one of their goals is to minimize the costs associated with the people, the technologies, and all those things within HR. Stakeholders provide strategic support for business units to attain goals. S2, increased organizational health and competitiveness. And number 3 is world-class skills and competencies in leadership. And number 4 is low-cost premium price HR service provider. So these are the goals or the objectives that we will be measuring with this actual strategy map. In the internal processes perspective is the work that we do that gives us um, that helps us to achieve the goals under stakeholder and the goals under financial. So it's a cause and effect matrix. P1 is process aligned HR planning with institutional strategy. This is an HR map, so it needs to align with the overall institutional strategy. P2, provide proactive workforce solutions. P3, ensure strategy-focused workforce. P4, manage, enhance a world-class leadership program. And P5, optimize service delivery through streamlined processes. And lastly, talent technology. T1 is to recruit and hire. T2, build a staff strategic competency bench strength, develop the skills of the people to replace those older people in the company. T3 is foster a high-performing culture. T4, invest in leaders at all levels. And T5, use technology solutions. And I'll break down the bottom because the bottom of the map is where intangible assets reside. This is a communication tool for first and foremost. When you're going out, have your strategy built on one actual strategy map and effectively communicate everything about your strategy based on this one sheet of paper. So the top of the strategy map are tangible assets, right? We can count the value of a stakeholder. We can measure the employee of choice, right? We can go from employee of choice, like in the U.S. News, where they report out the employer of choice. We can get those rankings. 3, maximize return on human capital. We can count that. That's a dollar amount. And minimize HR costs. We can count that. That's a dollar amount. All those are tangible assets. The bottom are the intangibles. Recruit and hire people, build a strategic competency bench strength, invest in leaders, use technology solutions to integrate. Here's the thing. The bottom is the how. The only way the bottom of the map is critical and important to an organization is if the bottom of the map is helping us to achieve our stakeholder value and to achieve our financial outcomes. If the bottom of the map, if the people, the technology, the leaders, if those things are not effective, we will not hit our goals as it relates to what we promise to our customers and what we promise to our stakeholders, right? There must be an alignment of the bottom of the map to the top of the map in a way that we can test every strategy review meeting. We can test to see if the intangible assets are helping to drive performance within our tangible assets. We can test it so basically when we have strategy review meetings and initiative review meetings, we test that cause and effect logic. And if we're not achieving those expected goals at the stakeholder level, and at the financial level, then we adjust our intangibles accordingly to help us to achieve our desired outcome. And we tested every strategy review meeting, and those meetings are every quarter. So we based on a quarterly cadence, we consistently attempt to test those intangibles to those financials, those tangible assets, to ensure that we're driving performance within our organization. The problem is people who don't use this approach, they never have a bird's eye view to be able to effectively test to see if the intangibles are driving performance. Now, if the intangibles are not driving performance, then the intangibles are not bringing value to an organization. I know you've heard that whenever you ask an executive leader what's the most value asset in a company, they say the people. But the people are as valuable as they are helping the company to perform and reach its goals. If the people are not helping the company to perform and reach its goal, then how valuable are the actual people, the actual technology, and the actual leaders and culture within the organization? This is a way that we align these objectives and the people are tied to them to certain things going up the map in the cause and effect logic. If we do this right, then we can achieve this. And if we can achieve the internal processes, then we can achieve this objective and this objective. And if we can achieve this, then we can achieve those outcomes. So it's a cause and effect logic. So how do we know the cause and effect? It's based on the measures that we associate with it, right? So we are measuring based on lead and lag measures. As you can see here at the top, it says the savings that we expect based on minimizing HR costs is 500,000 per year. You go down to stakeholder, we plan to a 50% reduction in HR costs compared to its competitor. As you go down another tier, percent of processes in HR streamline, target 65%. As you go down another tier, the percent of trained administrative staff on Workday targeted 50% in 1 year. So we have to give each one of these boxes, which are strategic objectives, a measure, a strategic measure, and a strategic target. And we have to work towards achieving those targets year after year, or when it comes to a small business, month after month. But basically, this is a cause and effect diagram that helps us to measure the value that the intangible assets are delivering to an organization, and helps us to measure, are we achieving our goals within our strategic plan? And as you see at the bottom, you have lead measures, and that you see at the top, the lag. So lag measures at the end of the year. Lag measures are measured end of year to end, or the end of the strategy period, meaning that you cannot change those measures over the lifetime of the strategy or year over year. A lead measure are measures that you can adjust and change every week, every month. So the lead measures, which are constantly dialed up or dialed down, we use those to help us adjust our strategy consistently. And as we get it adjusted correctly, it helps us to achieve the lag measures, which are the final outcomes. And those are in the stakeholder perspective and in the financial perspective. So what are the intangible assets? The people, the information, and the organizational capital. The people are the people skills, talents, and knowledge about the companies and the competitors. Information capital is the company's database, information system, networks, and technologies. And the company's organizational capital is the company's culture, leadership, alignment to the people, the goals, and employees' information to share information. And it goes back to the previous artificial bridges concept I shared within the last training. How do people share information across organization? That is critical as it relates to organizational capital. Back to the strategy map. So intangible assets are at the bottom, right? We have to make sure the people are ready to execute on the strategy. We have to make sure that the culture is ready. We have to make sure we have the right technology, and we have to make sure we have the right leadership. All of these at the bottom of the strategy map are critical. These are intangible assets that are critical in advancing a strategy. So just imagine that a company, Apple, let's use Apple for a second. So just imagine Apple decided to use hologram as a technology to their iPhone. So you can take the iPhone and you can hold it, and a hologram will appear from the iPhone or multiple people, and you can listen and watch them talk to each other. Well, right now, Apple doesn't have that technology or capability, but they developed a new strategic plan saying that the new iPhones will have that capability. Well, since they've identified the capability that's needed, they have to first look at the people within their organization and the culture to see if they have the skills to deliver on this new feature. If they do not have the skill and the culture to deliver on this new feature, there's only two things an organization can do. One is to recruit and hire from the competitor who has this capability, or to find people who have the capability to accelerate this product or feature on the iPhone getting to the market faster or before their competitor. Or they have to build up the competencies within the organization and train the people to be able to achieve this. To build the competency would take way more time than it will take to recruit competitors from outside the organization. Now, with saying that, this is the strategic dilemma that leaders will have when it comes to intangible readiness, human capital readiness, technology readiness. This is the dilemma that they have consistently when it comes to implementing a new change initiative, implementing a new technology, implementing a new feature. They always have to go back and think through it and make a hard decision. And that hard decision leads to certain people, lead to a buildup of anxiety and turnover in an organization. But we have to make the right decision to advance the organization as a whole, or the company as a whole. Now, what is human capital? So human capital consists of knowledge, skills, and attributes. Knowledge refers to the understanding of facts and information. Skills is represented in the practical application of knowledge of this information. And attributes is referred to the qualities and the characteristics of the people. Right? We have to have the people who have the right skills. The right knowledge, information, the people who have the right skills for application, and the people who have the right attributes. You have to have all three, right? And I know that you've seen people who have knowledge and skills, but not the right behavior or character. And as you leading a company, you leading a division, or you just running your own business, you've seen it before, and you see how it can hurt your business. So when you're seeking to recruit for human capital, you need to consider all three. Now, this concept of human capital readiness. Remember now, I use the example of the iPhone and hologram. Now, if Apple's competitor is trying to bring that product to the market as well, and they have a readiness timeline, 30 days, 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, right? The early bird catches the worm. So as a leader, you have to make a decision. Do you recruit from outside the company people who already have the skill and capabilities, or do you train and develop your team? It depends on the actual market. If you have a competitor or competitors who are focused on the same thing as trying to be the first based on first mover advantage to the market, you may need to look at people who already have the skill and bring them into your company, and allow the other people in your companies who have certain skills similar to those, and allow them to shadow those people as they get the product prepared and ready. Or if you're the only one working on this particular new feature, then you have the time to train up your people over time, and so they can be stronger. And these people have more time in the organization, more, they're more connected to your culture. So uh, they would add a little more value than someone you recruit outside the or externally into the organization. They will add a little somewhat more value, but it depends on the situation. But readiness is a factor when it comes to intangible assets. So, what does readiness look like? The first thing, based on the strategy, you need to evaluate the strategy and determine uh, what strategic competencies needed for us to get the person or the people in the organization ready to execute on the strategy. You need to align the position, the strategic family positions to certain key strategic objectives so you can see the alignment. You need to create a competency profile that means skills, behaviors, and values. You need to create an assessment to assess the people in those strategic job families based on those competencies. You need to administer and evaluate the results of the assessment. You need to develop an incentive plan, and you need to coach accordingly the people who you've brought into the organization or people within the organization. You need to coach them according to the gaps that you've identified based on the assessment of competencies of the people within your organization. So if you see T1 and T2, these are the people that we bring into the organization, and this is the development of the people. T3 to T5 has something to do with information capital and technology capital. Now, where do we align these two strategic objectives to? So we align them to objectives in the internal processes. Remember now, the internal processes is the place where the work has to be done. The work that increases value for the customers, stakeholders, and the work that increases value for the financial happens in the internal processes perspective. So these are the operational tasks that have to be completed effectively to achieve great stakeholder value and great financial value for the company. So we are aligning the intangible assets related to human capital to internal processes objectives. So what does it look like? So we've identified the objectives. Let me go back. The internal processes objective there at the top of this particular map on the next screen. We've aligned the people to the actual objectives, strategic jobs families, right? Organizational consultants, the human resources business partner, and shared services. Organizational development consultants again, HRBP, human resources business partners, and shared services. So it's 3 here, it's 3 there, and then talent acquisition and benefits is aligned to this one. So basically, the first thing we do, we align the strategic job families to the actual strategic objectives. Then we identify the competencies that will be needed in order for the people to be able to deliver on the objectives at the top. And these objectives, remember, come from the internal processes. So the organizational development consultants must learn all of these competencies, must develop these competencies on how to do these things. The HRBPs, human resources business partners, and shared services must develop these competencies. And again, in shared services, talent acquisition and benefits must develop these services here. Develop those competencies there. Now, the number underneath, it tells me how many people must develop those competencies. There's 10 here for org development, 50 for shared services and human resources business partners, 65 here, because human resources business partner is very, very large, and there's key people in organization development consultants here versus key people over here. And then we have talent acquisition, which is 35. Once we determine the strategic job families, the competencies they need, and the required number of people who need to be tested and developed, then we actually administer a competency assessment to the people, and we get a score. Anything that's green is a green light to execute on. Anything that's red, you cannot execute until you fully develop the people. Anything that's less than that's 50 and less, you have to proceed with caution. And you get these based on the scores from the actual assessment that they take. That determines readiness. The people in the organization are not ready until there is a green indicator of readiness for these particular strategic job families related to these strategic objectives and competencies. So you take those same competencies and you put them in an assessment. On the left side of the assessment, you allow the people in your company to self-assess. On the right side, you allow the managers to assess the same people who self-assessed on the same competencies because they're experiencing it and they're working with the people every day. So they can give an overall assessment on their skills. The concept of the assessment is EWL, meaning E, the person is able to teach others. W, the person is well-rounded and can fly alone. And L, the person is limited and may need support. So you read the competency and you place an X by them. So this assessment can be created in a Google Sheet or in a Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey, where you can actually get an overall score of a department of people, and you can get individual scores, and you can adjust accordingly based on the scores that you receive. Information capital. So now, after all of that, now we have to consider information capital. Information capital considers the technology, right? So in most companies, we have three types of technologies. One is transformational technology, analytical technology like data analytics, things like that we use for social media now. We interpret and we read that data, and we have transactional technology. So transactional technology is like a POS system in a restaurant. Everybody that walks in, we swipe their cards, we type their information to the system, and the information is saved within the POS system. Analytical data can live within the POS system too, and it shows us how often this person returned to the restaurant, what meals the person's consistently purchased, how much money the customer consistently, and you can also consistently spend. You can look at weekly, quarterly, annually as it relates to the demographics of people coming in and out of your restaurant or working with you based on whatever system you're using. Or if you're marketing using social media marketing campaigns such as Google ads or Facebook ads or Instagram ads or TikTok ads, you can actually look at the analytics based on demographics because it'll give you a world view of who is reviewing your information. And if you feel that in Memphis as opposed to Chicago, that you are a Memphis-based business and you're trying to grow into the Chicago market, but when you look at your analytics, your TikTok analytics, or your YouTube or Facebook analytics, and you see 10% growth in Chicago, and your goal is to achieve a 30% growth in year 2, you need to focus on increasing that by marketing to people, Chicagoans, to help to increase your analytics within percent or analytics within that city. So analytics play a key role. And then lastly, transformational. It's how do you take analytics and how do you take transaction information and create some transformational model for your organization. So something like a change management technology or a strategy management technology will be considered more of a transactional technology in a company. because it's designed to transform, to manage people, to transform them. The thing about technology is technology integration. Across the top, you see we have customer management, operation management, financial management, HR management, and strategy management. We take these three types of technology and we go across and we write them in where they fit as it relates to the top categories. And then we rank them low, medium, and high. And the goal is to have more high performing technologies. And we can adjust accordingly based on how we rank them. So it tells us if that's the technology we want to keep, or should we move on to a new technology. So it's a more lengthier process than how I'm explaining it now, but this is a process that you should go through in order to remain competitive in your market. Organizational capital. This is perhaps the least understood of the intangible assets, and a task of measuring it is correspondingly difficult. Organizational readiness consists of a company's culture, leadership, alignment of the people, strategic goals, and employees' abilities to share knowledge. This is one of the hardest one to measure, but we do have a system for measuring organizational capital. So we have the culture, the alignment, the people, and the leadership team. So culture is a pattern of shared values. It's a mindset, value, and belief that work well enough to be considered valid and therefore to be taught to new members who enter the organization so they can understand what the culture looks like. So if you go to most people saw the Ohio State win the championship game last week. What's today? Or this week. And in the game, you can basically feel the culture of Ohio State. You can feel the culture of Notre Dame. You can feel the culture of the Dallas Cowboys. You can feel the culture of Kansas City Chiefs. There's a culture that you can feel. We need to be able to measure the culture within our companies. If you think of Pinky with Slutty Vegan, whenever you go to a Slutty Vegan, you can feel the culture every time you walk into. So she was great at building a culture that's independent, that is recognized, and people can feel when they first enter into the door. As well as with Chick-fil-A, there's a culture there that's way different than a culture at McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's. So how do we set the culture and how do we measure it? Alignment, how do you take your strategic initiative, your strategy, and align them, or align the culture to the organizational strategy? The people, the teamwork, shared knowledge, how do you make sure it's aligned so knowledge can be shared across organization? And leadership. These are the driving factors of an organization. You have to make sure that the leaders are well educated and aligned to the culture and the goals to actually do the work. So how do we align the culture? The first thing we do, we create what we call a change agenda. We identify the state of the culture currently in, that the culture is currently in. We identify the performance of the culture. We identify teams. How do teamwork happens today? What are the competencies in development? So these domains within the change agenda, you can determine what those domains are. The thing is, we need to understand certain key factors related to culture in order to make a change. So as you see here, you have domain across this particular second tier. You have present and you have future. So you write the things that you want to change in the domains, and then you give a brief description of what they mean to you and how they currently function. And then you write how you want them to function in a more competitive culture. And the goal for you is to transition from this way, dated, stated values that were not cascaded or aligned in uh, organization of Department of Office of Human Resources, to develop a result-driven culture that is aligned, right? SMART goals were somewhat developed. You want to establish and align SMART goals within your organization. Teamwork is independent, unit focused. You want it to be cross-functional and using best practice sharing. Uh, Competencies are more tactical, transactional. You want them to be strategic. And development is independent, unit-based. You want it to be developmental plans that aligns with the strategy. So, you determine what this agenda looks like for your company, and you communicate this agenda out to your company, and you allow them feedback. That's first tier, second tier, and third tier of people. You allow all of them feedback in more of a town hall setting so they can react to this before you start to consider the goals and objectives and initiatives for your strategic plan. You want to make sure that people are clear what the organizational culture looks like before you go out and develop the culture. You want to get buy-in from the people, because the people are the ones who have to live within that culture and to work within that culture. So what does it look like? How do we measure it? So we have culture at the top, alignment second, teamwork and leadership at the bottom. These are attributes. So what are the measures? So when it comes to culture, foster awareness, and foster awareness within the organization. When it comes to alignment, we want to align technology to strategic job families. When it comes to teamwork, we want to ensure knowledge and staff assets that have strategic and potential that are shared. And we want to, when it comes to leadership, we want to develop leaders at all levels. Now, the measurements at the top to foster awareness is an engagement census. We need to test, we need to understand what the engagement of the people are within the organization. When it comes to alignment, we want to align the technologies across institutions. So we have a new technology. We want to make sure it's aligned across institution, streamlined. We don't want 4 or 5 different departments using having independent contracts for this with this same technology or using similar technology. We want to align it because we want to save the institution the dollars, and then we want to ensure that we have some type of intellectual property value on the technology we're using. Thirdly, teamwork. We want to enhance sharing practices. We want to ensure that people are sharing knowledge across the institution. And lastly, leadership. We want to close those leadership gaps. So what do we look at? So first, we want to identify the actual as it relates to engagement, as it relates to alignment, as it relates to teamwork, and as it relates to developing leaders. And we want to have a target. So our target is 65%, from 15 to 65%. We want to increase the level of engagement from our initial baseline assessment from 15 to 65%. And as you can see, red here and greens here. So we are measuring where we are currently before we execute the strategy. But what I'm showing you here is that we can definitely measure culture, but we have to identify what are we measuring. But when it comes to culture, there's 4 things that we have to consider. And those are 4 attributes. That's culture, alignment, teamwork, and leadership. According to the balanced scorecard methodology by Kaplan and Norton, they, in their research, in their similar research study, in their extended continuous research, they've identified that there are 4 attributes that we need to focus on as it relates to an organization to assess and to measure culture effectively. And it's related to the 4 attributes: culture, alignment, teamwork, and leadership.